So I just wanted to make a video, just want to test out my iPhone S and just try and test out the camera. So I thought I might make a quick video just talking about some things I've been going over recently. And I'm really passionate about relationships and how they work, the functionality of how a healthy relationship should work. And I think so many of us go through so many childhood traumas, and sometimes as on an unconscious level we actually don't know about these traumas because we haven't taken the time to actually do some kind of conscious reflection on our childhood or past relationships. And these traumas often get unnoticed and they kind of unravel themselves in very similar situations to the same trauma. And that's when we get them shots of adrenaline and dysfunctionality and with our own, feelings and the way we carry ourselves with other people. And it's interesting, because I think a lot of times that point of origin, the family of origin, has a lot to do with how we behave outside when we leave that zone in school and education, as well as our own personal relationships, intimate relationships, and then with our own careers. So it's a big thing that we work on ourselves, and it's important as well. I had said this on a Facebook status the other day, that it's important that we do this, because if we do not heal our own wounds, our personality traits get projected onto our our children, when we have children, because they model their parents. So this is really important, and sometimes, unfortunately, because some adults are the way they can be slightly narcissistic in nature, whether that's a shy narcissist or a more extroverted narcissist. Because they haven't healed them wounds, because they are very painful to deal with, and actually do some form of conscious reflection on them. Unfortunately, they will start projecting that onto the child, and it's someone who's in an incredibly powerless and defenseless state at such a young age. They can't retaliate, so they have to conceal parts of their personality, because obviously their parents shaming them, and that is the concealing part of shame, that it's meant for hiding, and when someone's shamed, they start to conceal that because they don't want to trigger that same shame attack with someone else. They don't want to have to go through that same anxiety because they experienced trauma previously from being shamed. So again, it's so important that we get healthy, not just for ourselves, but so we can be an example for those around us, and especially our children when we have children. We have to raise them to be healthy. We have to raise them to be they have to have high self-esteem and high self-respect, and I prefer actually using the term healthy levels of self-esteem, because there is so much of a thing of having an excessive overload of self-esteem, and that is usually caused by narcissistic behavior. People will disagree with that and say, well, narcissism is the absence of self-esteem, which it is. But sometimes when someone is maybe not necessarily narcissistic, but maybe egotistical, I suppose there is a slight difference in these words, it can produce an overload of excessive self-confidence, that people begin to become less empathetic. So it kind of mirrors certain narcissistic traits, but they're not a true narcissist, if that makes sense. So the important thing is not necessarily, it's about having healthy levels of self-esteem and high amounts of self-respect. You can't have too much self-respect for yourself. So again, I think this is so important, and it's not talked about nearly enough, and it's such an unfortunate thing that a child has to get through that because their parent was irresponsible, and then the child goes through life in their childhood essentially sacrificing certain parts of their childhood because they can't engage in relationships the way they want to with their peers, because they haven't learned the basis of actually loving themselves, because they have been shamed so much as a child, and that love from their parent is being conditional love. That's a big thing. That's kind of like the parent saying, right, well, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. So again, that might be if a child doesn't listen to their parent. If they take too much attention away from their parent, then the child will be shamed. That is really unfortunate. Like I said, a child in its natural state should be allowed to be itself. Unfortunately, when they begin getting shamed all the time because the parent has made them so receptible to abuse, because in a sense, because they have not actually loved them unconditionally, the child begins to accept abuse from other people as well, because they think that's normal. That is such a shame that we have to do that to a child, and make them excessively vulnerable to abuse later in life because they didn't have that conditional love. So again, by healing ourselves, we can serve other people better as well, whether that be in our own relationships, our careers, or with our children when we have kids and stuff like that. So it's extremely important, and it gives you peace of mind, it gives you a sense of confidence, and I really think that actual healing is the internalization of power. And I think the amount of pain we go through sometimes is the kind of direct correlation to the amount of power that can be released. And that isn't to say we have to go through pain and peril and discomfort all the time, but it's just to give you guys a little bit of hope that if you do have a little bit of childhood trauma that I think we all have to a certain degree, maybe some more severe than others, that if you do heal it, it gives you a sense of pride and a sense of power and a sense of confidence. And like power, a lot of people confuse power being a negative thing. I think there's a difference between, I saw a book title the other day saying it was called Power versus Force, and it just made me think that power can be actually a good thing. I think force is a bad thing in some respects, but again, power without control isn't really true power. True power is harnessing your own essence and your own confidence and using that in a constructive way, not in a destructive way towards others. So it is extremely important that we try and make a conscious effort every single day to commit to some form of personal growth, whether that's reading something positive, maybe it's just doing some kind of introspective work with ourselves, trying to pay attention to our past relationships. Why is it we seem to be attracted towards this certain individual? And also, this is another big thing, I'm glad I mentioned this, because when a child is exposed to that abuse when they're young, they will gravitate towards them people outside of the home because they think that's the normal thing. The relationship with their parent, the child-parent relationship, because there was abuse, they are comfortable in that dance. They know the choreography. They know how to adapt to that individual, and because they are so adaptive to that certain individual, there's a slight, in a very unusual sense, even though there is a tremendous amount of discomfort with these relationships, because they know the ins and outs of how to adapt to that personality type, they will find a slight bit of comfort and familiarity with these types of people, which is not a good thing because it further actually feeds and fuels the problem, as opposed to actually fueling the solution. So again, we need to kind of heal ourselves so we can be then better and serve other people better as well as actually experience life on a whole new level. I know from doing my own healing work and stuff like that, and own personal growth work every single day, you do get a little bit more enjoyment out of life, that you do have these blissful moments of where you can handle yourself correctly. There's a certain amount of not just confidence, but the fact that you can protect yourself from this abuse, this outside source. We're trying to work ultimately on our own autonomy, which means not to be governed by or influenced by external sources. You are self-governed by yourself. You can live life on your terms. That doesn't mean we're not empathetic, that we're not compassionate, we're not we're not trying to be, we're trying to hone these traits, which are actually very good traits. I mention this because sometimes when you are in that state of emotional abuse, you do develop a sense of compassion, a sense of emotional intelligence. You do develop a sense of adapting to certain challenges, which is a fantastic thing. But again, in a real world context, that isn't a healthy thing within a relationship. That shouldn't have to be there for a relationship to be healthy. A healthy relationship is when it's a mutual thing. There's a mutual distribution of love, care, respect on both parties. Isn't a conditional thing like, you do something for me, I'll give you respect. No. We don't abide by society's dysfunctionality. We govern ourselves first, and we protect ourselves from any kind of incoming negativity. So again, this is kind of the purification process. People refer to it as it's self-refinement. You're trying to remove these impurities from your body, or any unwanted elements, so that you can remain a whole, integrated person. By yourself. You don't have to have this, other source to make you happy. And again, we're trying to do this for our own benefit. We're trying to do this so we're not saying yes to everyone else and no to ourselves. Such an important thing, and I'm so passionate about it because I think it just affects so much of our lives. And it's such a thing, such a shame, like I said, that a child has to go through that. And some people go through their entire lives like not knowing these issues. And probably when some people hear this, they'll be like, oh, right, that makes so much sense, because, you know, they understand the ins and outs of the complications of certain personalities and personality traits they might have themselves. So I hope you guys have enjoyed that video. I'm just going to try and briefly mention something I made on a Facebook status today about having internal gravity. And, you know, a lot of people refer to this. I'll try to do my best. Sometimes I really think that we are attracted to certain people, sometimes based on their level of self-esteem is welcoming to us, and it's not necessarily always the whole spectrum of our emotional needs match someone else's, because oftentimes our emotional needs can be very different to other people's, but we are attracted to them. And I think there is an element of when you have certain self-esteem, you are attracted to certain people. Certain people might view you as a target, some people might not, some people might be just intrigued by you, I don't know. But there's a certain element, I think, when I've seen it in my own observations between a narcissistic person and someone who might be emotionally dependent, someone might be an emotional people pleaser. You know, them two archetypes seem to be very attracted towards each other because of that. Again, that family of origin, that relationship in that household was very similar, probably between the parents and then again between the child. So my point being is sometimes we can be attracted to people's self-esteem because there is a kind of welcoming factor. You know, there isn't any kind of boundaries saying, you know, I'm going to harm you or something like that. And that's, unfortunately, sometimes it isn't the way it's supposed to be. There should be kind of you know, a kind of default setting of some certain boundary when you first meet someone, because you don't know them. Sometimes when we're too welcoming, we can welcome in sometimes negative relationships, and this is the classic again archetypes of the emotionally dependent and the narcissist bind together. People call it the human magnet syndrome, when a positive and a negative forces attract to one another. And it can be extremely damaging, and especially for the emotionally dependent one, because they can actually internalize certain things. Unfortunately, with the narcissistic person, their trauma is actually deeper than the emotionally dependent, so they can't go in and do introspective work, because in their eyes, they don't think there's anything wrong. Deep down, they know something's wrong, but that pain is far too great for them to handle, and oftentimes they don't go to therapy, they don't actually do their personal growth work or their healing work. So the best thing we can do is, again, have certain mechanisms in place, so when we go into certain relationships, certain environments, that we are in a healthy state, we're in a happy state, and we can maintain that. You know, it's having self-sustenance, you know, being in a healthy state and governed by yourself without dependent or being dependent upon outside sources, outside of external sources, so we can be healthy on our own. It's, I suppose, again, self-reliance in a sense, but again, when we're trying to build our own autonomy, we're trying to develop things like, you know, we're trying not to be perfectionists. We're trying to focus on excellence. So if we make mistakes, we forgive ourselves quickly and we learn from the mistakes and we carry on, we persevere. It might include things like having the ability to be alone without experiencing loneliness. So again, loneliness isn't the same as aloneness. So again, that's another thing. It might be setting up a boundary, saying, you know, if someone's hurting your feelings, you don't let that just hurt you. You say, no, that isn't appropriate. Little things like this. What else? I'm trying to think of something else. Having the ability to walk away from a relationship when it's not right, instead of, you know, being in that really toxic relationship. It might be something like, again, being not maybe counter-dependent, so again, having this independence complex where you don't allow anyone to help you, because if someone helps you, you feel like that isn't being dependent, because a lot of times when people struggle with this, because they've been shamed when they've asked for help before, it actually starts actually creating that habit within the person that they're not allowed to ask for help. And this, I think, is sometimes when some people have a problem asking a question because they've been shamed before and they've made to feel humiliated for asking a question. They can become counter-dependent, so they can actually be so independent that they never ask for help, and that means they struggle because of that. Again, I think there's such a thing as being called, this is just a term I've come up with, but intradependent, or autonomously intradependent, if that makes sense. So being intradependent means that you can ask people for feedback, you can ask people for help, but you're mainly doing all the work yourself. the power's in your hands, but you have no issue asking questions. You have no problem making mistakes along the way, because you know you can handle it. So again, a lot of times with these videos, where it is titled, self-help and stuff like that, or personal development, personal growth, whatever it is, we're learning how to help ourselves. There's a really good quote that says, if you ever need a helping hand, then look at the end of your arm. And that's what I mean. We're learning how to help ourselves, which is an extremely valuable lesson, because sometimes we can't rely on outside sources to be there. And it's kind of, we're healing thyself. We're trying to know thyself, but again, heal thyself so we can be thyself. So I hope all that makes sense. And I really think the gateway to healing is in self-love. So again, and a lot of people confuse this as being egotistical and making stuff up about yourself which isn't true so you feel better. No, it's liking what is already there. It's having some kind of self-compassionate internal dialogue. Positive self-talk, positive imagery, limiting certain negative relationships, negative imagery. Again, it's this purification process, and then having the mechanisms, like I said, in place that you can handle mistakes. You have no problem asking questions. You have no problem walking away from people who don't give you conditional love. You have no problem you'd have no problem. Well, basically what I've just said, asking questions, you don't mind making mistakes. You know when to set a boundary, very important. So again, these things all eventually add up, and it's part of the purification process. And I don't think we ever fully heal from our upbringing, but we can do sure as hell of a damn good job of trying to make it better every single day. So I call it our everyday main objectives. These are the things that every day, these principles that you try and live by, and you're trying to adhere by them as much as possible. And we're not trying to strive for perfection, we're trying to strive for just consistency and excellence. And again, there's a difference between excellence and perfectionism. With excellence, you have no problem making mistakes. Excellence in its Latin root, it actually means surpass. It's to go beyond what you did previously. So even if you make a mistake, you go beyond it. Again, it's kind of similar to the Kaizen principle, that you make continuous improvement every single day, and little by little, a little becomes a lot. So again, it's that art of continuous improvement. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake, as long as you go beyond it, you're doing fine. So again, we're trying to improve day by day, and then day by day eventually makes this monumental difference in our own personality. So, and then with perfectionism, that is totally different, because I don't even think you enjoy the process. You shame yourself so easily. Because you're hypersensitive to making a mistake. And a great way to get over that, I think, is just throwing yourself into the deep end, or doing something where you might make a mistake, so you become accustomed to it a lot more easier. Where there's kind of a low barrier entry for it, meaning that if you make a mistake, it's not fatal. So I'm not saying like test, or try and learn to fly in a plane and test, this principle of learning to adopt failure by crashing the plane. No, I mean where it's a low barrier entry to fail, meaning that it might be asking a teacher a question, and if they say an answer which makes you feel uncomfortable, like you've done something wrong or something, and that you can handle it. Or it might be learning a new hobby, something you've never done before, which you probably won't be that good at, and stumbling along the way, but eventually learning how to do it. It might be I don't know, it might be doing a course, something that you don't feel 100% comfortable doing. It's just trying to step outside your comfort zone. So it's trying to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So eventually that becomes like your new normal, and eventually like you start actually breaking the barriers of your own comfort zone. And from starting out, your comfort zone might have been this small, and you could only do so little, and then it gets expanded even more, and then you try more things, and it gets expanded, and then from being from this to this, your comfort zone and your new normal is expanded tremendously, and your kind of sphere of competence is grown and expanded. So and this is all under the influence of courage. I think it takes a tremendous amount of courage, being that brutally honest with yourself, that you can improve the things that you found uncomfortable. So again, it's kind of like the quotation that life either expands or shrinks in proportion to our courage. So, and courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage means you're scared, but you still have a willingness to make a change for your own betterment, for your own for your own future. So again, it's trying to take care of ourselves, and really one of my main values is self-respect, that I honor myself first. My feelings, my attitude, what I want to do, and I'm trying to honor and respect myself in certain relationships. So I don't want to take people's abuse. You know, I want to put these barriers up and say, no, that isn't acceptable. And, you know, I'm trying to adopt that now. And it's been going extremely well the last couple of years of really trying to really enforce it and take it extremely seriously. And that's another thing, you've got to take it seriously. And, you know, commitment in its Latin root actually means entrust. And entrust means to assign responsibility to someone to do something. So again, I want to, you know, allow you guys to entrust and make that commitment to yourself, that you're going to assign this responsibility to yourself, to make the commitment every single day to heal yourself and to grow yourself. Because as you heal and you internalize your own power, which is true power, you start to put yourself in different environments because you feel more confident. Your self-esteem's been raised. It's at a healthy level now. You have more self-respect for yourself because you're honoring yourself more. You know, you're respecting these wounds so they can heal. You know, you start putting yourself in different situations before you know it. You know, you've achieved all these different micro accomplishments, but also these major big goals, because you don't have that level of anxiety anymore. You know, you don't have that level of fear anymore. And there's a good quotation which says, you know, a man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears. So again, you know, the fear alone of having that anxiety can just be as stressful to actually experience it all over again. So again, we're trying to remove and erase that so we can be fully functioning, autonomous human beings. So hope you guys have enjoyed that video. Any questions, comment below, and speak soon. Thank you very much.